Hello and welcome to my first sewing video. If you're new here, my name is Kelly, the artist behind this channel, The Hearth Fairy. My videos illustrate an array of simple living topics, and today we're traveling back a few weeks ago, or a few centuries, as I begin a sewing adventure. What was I saying? This is the third time I filmed this commentary. This will be my first time filming a full-length sewing video with commentary like this, so I'm a little nervous, but I think it's time. I'm starting an 18th century dress today, basically just a modern version of an 18th century gown. At least for me, to make something modern from this period, really all you have to do is take away all of the underpinnings and the understructure. I do have a pair of stays that I made. I stitched them last year. I'm hoping that this dress will translate well into a modern setting. It's about mid-April now. I say that knowing full well that I will probably be sharing this video in like the middle of July or something. Hopefully not September. I am being a bit hopelessly optimistic here and thinking that I'm going to finish this in a week. Slowly losing the light, so I'm panicking a little bit on the inside. So instead of standing here, this is just my dress form, I'm going to cut it out, cut the lining out, and I will see you for that in just a minute. Okay, that's enough. Hello, Juniper. Mwah. I love you. See you soon. I've decided to make the dress out of this vintage printed cotton. It's a 2.5 yard remnant that I thrifted locally, and I have just enough to make a dress. I chose this fabric instinctively, and it turns out that I wasn't too far off. Printed cottons were available in the 18th century, with smaller scale designs coinciding with the narrow silhouettes of the latter half of the century. The more elaborate and colorful a print was, the more expensive the dress, so I think this is suitable for a simple and unassuming design for an everyday woman like me. The pattern I'm referencing is from Janet Arnold's Patterns of Fashion 1, found on page 97. I'm scaling it up manually on gridded wrapping paper, and there are a few changes that need to happen. For one, the dress is quite small, so I'm adding an inch of width to the center back. I've made a quick mock-up of the sleeve, which I am most nervous about, and I'm adding 1 inch of extra width, since the cut of the sleeve is quite narrow and I just don't foresee it fitting comfortably otherwise. I did luck out with this fabric remnant. I had just enough fabric left over after cutting out the bodice to have a midi-length skirt. After cutting away my skirt block, I get to work on cutting out the pieces for the bodice. I've carefully drawn in a 1/2 inch seam allowance to give me plenty of room for turning under and felling the seam down. I spent the day cutting out my pieces, both from the printed fabric and my lining, which is just a simple, plain, washed cotton from my fabric stash. Rather than stitching up the body and lining pieces separately, attempting to match them at the seams and then bag them out, I'm choosing to flatline each panel separately. This is a historical lining method that I've really come to love, and it's actually quite simple. The panels are sandwiched together and secured with a loose basting stitch. This will keep everything in place when I begin to assemble the bodice together. This is always, I think, the most relaxing part of a sewing project, is this sort of mindless sewing work. If you're like fidgety and just you need something to do, this is great. I love doing basting stitches. Honestly, the prep work that goes into these projects is so much more than the actual sewing. Making a dress is just sewing the pieces together, but there's a whole world of things you have to do before you even get to that step. Good morning, it's the next day, and as you can see, I have finished pad stitching all of my pieces, so it should look like this. And now I'm going to attach all of the seams together, leaving the center back open because I will be inserting a very modern zipper. The pieces are put together fairly easily. I know this isn't necessarily a tutorial, but I am endeavoring to show you what I'm up to here. I learned this technique from an amazing historical costuming YouTuber named Ellen Abrahamson. She's a Swedish artist, and she creates wonderful videos about actual historical sewing, so this lining method I will link in a video of hers down below. Okay, I've arrived at my least favorite part of any project, and that is the sleeves. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm just gonna baste in a zipper so I can put this on myself. I have drafted it exactly as the book advises. And, you know, it does seem to, I know it's the right way. There's a little dart in the back, which I haven't, I mean, all of this is penned. All of this is penned in. And then I know that the shoulder strap goes here. And the extra fullness will be pleated in. But I still feel like there's no ease. I don't know if this is gonna work. After that existential crisis, I decided to skip the sleeves for the time being and work on finishing off the edges of the bodice. This is done simply by first clipping the edges of the curves so they turn under more easily, folding them under, and then top stitching them into place. Top stitching is not a very 18th century detail, it's true. I should have done more of a slip stitch on this, but I really preferred this way. It was a little easier, and I don't mind top stitching since this is meant to be more of a modern interpretation, I suppose. Once the bodice is finished, it's time to tackle the skirt. This is actually the most simple part of the project because it's simply 2 rectangles cut out, attached at the side seams, and then box pleated down into the waist. Rather than pleating the skirt on a flat surface, I'm pinning it to my dress form and tacking the pleats down there. That way it will mimic the natural curve of my body and will help the skirt fall in a more natural way. Hello. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick, so my voice is a bit nasally, that is why. But I wanted to show you, I finished pleating all around the front to about the back princess seams. I'm going to go and just tack these pleats down so I can remove this from the form. But I'm not pleating it down to the waist measurement yet because my form's waist doesn't necessarily match my waist. And I don't want to pleat this and then have to unpleat it and adjust it, so I'm going to leave this loose, and then when I lay this pleated section inside, I can just pleat the remainder to the seam and then cut off the excess if there is any. I hope that made sense. So I've arrived at the part where I'm cutting my shoulder strap, and by some lucky, happy accident, the strip that I ripped off from the edge of the skirt block is the exact width I need for my shoulder strap plus the seam allowance, and I have 4 of them, 2 for the top and then 2 that will be interfaced. That'll be the lining layer for the strap. So yes, I love when things work out like that. So I'm still a little bit sick, but I'm gonna walk you through what I'm doing here. So I have my strap piece folded or open here, and I've kind of shimmied it underneath like where I want it. The sleeve head, which is now attached at the underarm, I'm gonna bring it up. See how it just fits in there? I'm just gonna pin it for now so I can show you. So that's the raw seam here. There's gonna be a tuck, a pleat or 2 taken, the fullness of the sleeve head, and then we take and fold this part over the raw edges and then just turn that under and stitch. So you see that? It's a nice little sandwich. I don't know. I hope that made sense. After finally figuring out and finishing the sleeves, I get to work on tacking the skirt into the bodice, a fairly simple process. Even if it is a little difficult to explain, all I can say is I completely winged it. In my final desperate and frenzied moments, I spent time finishing the dress completely, which includes tacking down the zipper in the back to hide the raw seam, finishing the edges of the armholes, and the most finicky part of the entire project, surprisingly, finishing the cuffs, which was the same method as the bodice, simply clipping into the curves, folding them under, and stitching them down into place. At long last, after days and weeks of effort, I finished the project. And now, if you haven't scrubbed forward already, it is time for the reveal. Closing thoughts, closing thoughts, closing thoughts. So what's left to do except wrap up the video? It took me a full month to finish this dress, and as with any new sewing project, there were many pitfalls along the way. The perfectionist in me doesn't like this dress. However, objectively, I know I did the best that I could, and I learned. I was worried that this project would go a little too smoothly and it wouldn't be interesting to watch. However, you saw my struggles along the way. I had to trust the pattern, I had to trust the process, and I think it worked out beautifully. It's always an interesting experience working from a new pattern, especially an extant pattern, something that we're not accustomed to wearing in the modern day, because it does look crazy on paper and it looks crazy as you're putting it together, but that was the genius thing about pattern making throughout the past. People were experts at shaping clothing to the human body, or I should say experts at shaping the human body with clothing. I think my biggest rub with the dress is my positioning of the shoulder straps. While I'm aware that the décolleté and the chest is very open, this is just sliding off my shoulder a little bit, and if I could move this over maybe half an inch next time. My next biggest critique for this is I wish I had not went with a modern zipper. Number one, it is impossible to get on by myself. I had to have my grandma zip me up in this. I do wish I had went for a front placket closure, and I think I could have made that work beautifully, and it would have made it 10 times easier to get the dress on. Never mind the idea of sewing on hooks and bars. I already had to replace the zipper, plus the trouble of not being able to get it on. In my objective of making this a simple and easy dress, I actually made it a lot harder, and I should have went the historical way. So sometimes the book knows best, do it by the book, but I'm learning, and I hope you learned something too with all of this. I have to admit, I didn't think I would finish the project. I didn't think I would end up adding sleeves. I really wanted to stay true to the pattern. I didn't want to go with a super modern sundress interpretation. I will try it again until I get it right, but considering this was a pile of fabric aiming for the trash bin, I think I did a good job. If you were here for the sewing adventures, I really hope you enjoyed my formatting of this. I hope you enjoyed the process, and that hopefully you were able to sew along with me and finish a project or two, because this vlog was quite long. I think that's it. I'm going to close it out here. If you've been following along to the end, thank you so much. Happy sewing. If you are just getting into sewing for the first time, know that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to struggle. And each time you make something, you will get better, I promise. Believe me, I was told by several professors in university that I should not pursue sewing. And they would have been right at the time, but I wanted to spite them. I really did want to get better, just for my own sake. And I have. Not perfect. Life is a journey. I'm gonna stop. Thank you so much for watching. If you were so inclined, I hope you will subscribe. Again, I'm not strictly a sewing channel. I'm not even a dress historian, or I don't do strictly historical dress. However, if you liked this sort of thing, I am hoping to create more in the future. Hope you're having a lovely day or evening, and a happy spring, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!